Hey there folks, this is me and Malorian, and it's time for another video that comes from one of you. Frederick Gleacher asked me, Malorian, why don't you talk about narrative play? And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to be talking about three things today. I want to be talking about what narrative play is. I'm going to talk about why it's really lacking currently in Warmachine for most people. And lastly, I want to be talking about how to make it work. And you might notice that you're not seeing me. There's some art in the background, and that's really to put you in the mood. So maybe look at some of this beautiful art I stole from the internet, and it can maybe put you in the mood for what this is all about. So the very first part is, well, what is narrative play? And what narrative play is something where you have a game that has narration to it. There's a story to it. So it's not really, hey, look, we're playing a game of chess. I'm trying to defeat you. There's something else behind it. There's some other woven storyline being put into this game. And this can come in many different forms. You know, maybe this is a single game where we're saying, all right, I'm trying to take out your defensive position. These are my things here. This is yours. This is what's happening. We're in this city, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe it's part of a campaign. Maybe it's something like the new Oblivion campaign, and one game is going to lead to the other. And it's like, okay, the better that I did here, this will change this in the next game. And oh, we took a crushing loss here, so now we're going to be having less points. Or maybe this died, so now I can't be using that, or something like that. Or maybe it's a full-on tournament. Maybe it's a full-on tournament where one game to the next, or it's really mattering what happened to you, what happened to others. Everything is building up as a story. So that's what narrative play is. Well, then the next question is, why are we not really seeing a lot of it in Warmachine today? And I really think that there's three different reasons for this. One, the way that the story and the way that the actual world and the fluff of Warmachine is actually created. Secondly, I think there's a challenge in the way that you actually make your lists. And lastly, I think there's a real challenge in the way that you actually have the tournament structured right now. So let's take these on one by one. So the very first one that I mentioned there is really just the whole premise of the story and the mythos behind Warmachine, where you have Immorin, you have these different nations, and they're fighting. And I think the big thing here to understand is that we are not going after low-hanging fruit. So in some other games where it's really easy to get into that, let's look at, Games Workshop and their 40K, and looking at their Warhammer Fantasy rather, we're looking at very basic topics. Hey, I am vampires. Hey, I am the humans. I am the elves. I am the dwarves. I am the whatever. I am things that are very core that you can grab anyone in society, Western society, and be like, hey, look, here is this idea, and they'll be right on board. And really, 40K is really no different. It's just really like, hey, what if we had elves in space? What if we had dwarves in space? So it's really, really easy to grab onto. Orcs are another easy one, whether they have laser cannons or axes and clubs. Hey, it's orcs, they're doing crazy orky things, and everybody can get behind it. And the big thing is that when you try and think in your mind the way that these different factions would actually operate, a lot of people already have an idea in their head, right? The orcs are going to be doing stupid, crazy things. The dwarves are going to be more stubborn and set in their ways and defensive, and, whatever. The thing is that you already have an idea in your mind of the psychology of what these created things are. Now, the problem is that once you go to Warmachine, that's not really there. I mean, we have trollkins, and then we have these, circle type Ouroboros people that are kind of werewolves, kind of stone things, kind of like weird beast things. Everything is a real mix, and it's really not something that you can very easily just say, hey, you random person in the street, I'm going to be having my Signar versus the Scorn. What do you think is going to happen in this story, right? Like a random person wouldn't know. Whereas if you say like, hey, look, I'm going to be having my orcs versus the undead, they'll be like, oh, okay, cool. Is it something where the orcs came up into like an undead crypt? Is it whatever? It's a lot easier to put a story to a mythos you already understand. Now, the Privateer Press's credit. They've done a lot of work. There is a lot of story out there. It's just not something that's readily accessible and just kind of already built into our society. So you have to realize that's something that's really going to be hampering people trying to play like narrative play because it's not as easy to get into. Now, the next thing I want to get into is the way that you actually build your list. And for the most part, it's pretty good, right? You can go and you can build your list however you want it. You know, the themes can sometimes be restrictive, but you can always play out a theme. But I think the real thing that's the most restrictive compared to some other games is the actual leaders of your force. In other games, you have a lot more customization you can do to your leaders. And what you can do then is really create a leader which is like you. Hey, I want to be playing in this style. I'm going to be building my leader to be exactly the way I want it to be. And I can be taking this character that I developed, and I can go from game to game. I can make some small tweaks. I can say like, oh right, I've been doing really well, so I'm going to upgrade my armor, or I defeated this foe and I'm now going to have this weapon because I took it. That's not really something you can do inside of Warmachine. You can say there's all these developed pre-existing characters that would have stories behind them, and again, we could get into the whole debate of, well, how well do people even know those stories? But the main thing is that there's not those options there to create those custom characters and make them your own. And that's a real challenge then to people to really invest and really want to get into the story, when you can really say that, hey, look, this army is led by Orc war boss Morco, who is really this and this and this and really likes this and this, and it's something you can really personally invest in because it's yours. You designed it. Well, you can't really do that. Now, the last thing I want to be touching into as well that's a real challenge is just the fact of the way that the actual tournaments work. You know, whenever you are going to practice for the next event, it's probably going to be in a steamroller format, which means you are going to be fighting over circles, rectangles, flags, and objectives. And that's the way it's going to be. It is very set. You know what 6 missions there's going to be, and that's what you're going to be playing for. That's what you're going to be trying for. Now, of course, it's really up to all the TOs and the way that they're going to be basing these things. But my experience is that in other systems, they're a lot more open with these things and a lot more inventive. A great example is that for a long time, the ones that I went here for the Games Workshop games were Onslaught and now the Basement, and you never knew what type of wacky scenarios they come up with. Another great one was Warhammered, which always had these crazy scenarios. And when all of a sudden you're not fighting over circles, rectangles, flags, and objectives, and instead, hey, in this one here, you have to go and claim these 2 buildings. You need to go and kill this messenger before it gets to the other side. Oh my God, all these things are on fire and the fire is going to be spreading, or this, or this, or that. And there's so many different permutations. Well, all of a sudden what you're needing to do is build your list to be ready for that. Instead of building my list to make sure I have solos for flags, units for circles, blah, 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 I am now trying to build a list that can be taking on whatever crazy scenario I might have to actually face and get into. And so because of that as well, if I'm practicing for a tournament where I don't know what I'll be facing, well, in what scenario, I'm going to be playing games where I'll be more open to saying, let's do something wacky, let's do something different. Whereas opposed to if I'm preparing for a steamroller, I want to play steamroller games. So really, just the way that we play this game is heavily influencing the fact that we don't go towards narration type games with a narrative, because that's not the way that this game works in general. So those are all the things you're really struggling with. These are all things working against you if you want to do narrative games in Warmachine. So the last thing I want to cover is, well, what do you do then to actually make it work? And to be completely blunt, do it however you fucking want to do. The big thing to understand here is that when it comes to these narrative things, it is 100% within your own control what you want to do. So if all of a sudden you have a group of people that are interested in this and they're wondering what should we do whatever you want. Have fun, be imaginative. Either you can take the existing fluff of what there is currently, or you can completely make your own. Don't feel that you need to be stuck within the confines of what they've actually said. Do whatever you feel is going to be making an enjoyable game experience for yourself. I said that one of the things that's also a challenge to you is the fact that you can't make your own casters. Well, guess what? There's something called Caster Draft, and you can make your own casters. So you can always take that and say, here are your options. You can take so many cards, make your own caster, and then we're going to be playing a tournament. Or maybe getting into that one, maybe you're going to start playing tournaments where it's not going to be just steamroller. Maybe you're going to be doing things where there's going to be these crazy scenarios with a story behind them. Maybe you're going to be doing something more like the Oblivion campaign, where one game really determines what happens in the next one. These are all in your control. And even though the norm right now is to not do these things and just to play steamrollers, that does not have to be the way it is. And maybe you can always mix and sprinkle this in, right? Because of course, look, there's a lot of people playing these games for different reasons. Some are looking for more narrative games, some are looking for more competitive games. So you can always mix and match. Maybe this month we do a straight up steamroller. Next month we're going to be doing X. We're going to be doing whatever we want. Next month after that, don't worry, competitive players, we're doing another steamroller. Next one there, something different. And I mean, this is really all win-win. This is now making it so that all the types of players are finding what they want. And even for those competitive players, it gives them a chance to refresh and recycle. You know, if you're one of these people that's always going all cylinders all the time, you're going to burn out. So, man, even if you're a competitive player, this is something you might want to consider. So that's narrative play. That's how you can make it work for you. Very honestly, it is very difficult in Warmachine for the reasons I gave. And so you're going to have a much bigger struggle trying to make these things work. Of course, if you're out there playing like the old Warhammer Fantasy, it'd be a lot easier to do this, but it's not like it's impossible. These things happen all the time. People work these things in, and all you need to do is put in the effort to do it for yourself. It's really no different than like Dungeons and Dragons, right? If you have a group of people being like, man, I really wish we could be playing Dungeons and Dragons, all you need is one person who has a shred of creativity to step forward and design something for everybody to play. So there you have it. If you have any comments on this, I always love hearing your thoughts. But anyway, we'll catch you later. Bye.